So I asked Eric then, so someone will finally fucking talk sci-fi with me.
Yes.
And so I asked him, dude, we got to go over The Expanse because I've been geeking out for months on this show. Gary over at Nerdrotic turned me onto it, as he probably has turned hundreds or thousands of other people onto it.
Right.
Because I would have assumed it was crap because it was initially a sci-fi show, and those are all crap.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, if something says sci-fi original on it, it's like, okay, well, maybe a few episodes will be good, but
I mean,
you never can tell.
Wasn't Warehouse 13 sci-fi?
Yeah, it was. I want to say that came on like right after the reboot of Battlestar Galactica at one point.
Okay, I liked Warehouse 13. I did like that. I didn't like its like sister show, Eureka.
Yeah,
I thought that show was kind of stupid. but I did like Warehouse 13. I discovered it after it was already canceled, luckily.
Yeah.
But so
that's how most of us find them.
So my hopes were not high for The Expanse, but I got lucky in that it actually turned out to be, in my estimation, a pretty fantastic show. And I think pretty fantastic because it's more along the lines of a classic old school sci-fi where they're really interested in like the particulars of the science. It's like
right.
I'd classify it as a hard sci-fi. And in the way, it's funny that the way in which they do that is to have people, they don't focus on like special people. They focus on like normal Joes and kind of weird circumstances or dealing with the realities of a slightly different world. And this, I think all the good sci-fi movies do that. I mean, when you think of aliens, like you think of space truckers just surviving.
Right.
And in this particular show isn't a whole heck of a lot different than that. I mean, essentially they're ice miners that when the show starts out.
Yeah, there's a common theme that kind of develops in most of the sci-fi stuff where everything's kind of Earth-based. Is we're going to go out to the asteroids or whatever, go mine a whole bunch of minerals or ice in this particular case, and then it's going to get shipped places. So it kind of follows along with the crew on that, and I was like, okay, well, this is kind of interesting.
Yeah. So
at first I didn't watch the show, and then I was like, okay, well, Nikki P can't shut up about it, so I guess I'll have to go watch it. And then here we are.
Yeah. So the reason I'm really interested in it, especially for like given the context in which we're talking about it, is the first thing, like right from the get-go, like they set the politics are going to be such a huge part of this show and kind of force a lot of what goes on. A lot of the big themes are war and, population diaspora. Like it in a very real way deals with a lot of the shit that we have to deal with right now politically. And I enjoy that it doesn't feel forced. It's also interesting to me that it's probably one of the most diverse casts I've ever seen in a TV show. But it
never a little bit of everybody in there, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it doesn't ever feel like they're forcing it on it. It just, oh, hey, we happen to choose a bunch of diverse actors, not like, let's fill the quota, So
right.
As someone who cares about social justice but doesn't want to, like, thinks it's stupid to force people into it, I like the subtlety and nuance with which they do that. There's also some fun things that you'll notice, like, kind of later on. I'm going to try and, like, keep spoilers out of this as much as possible and just kind of let it run with us.
Right.
Full disclosure, I've watched the first 4 seasons, and I think I'm like 3 books after that. I've listened to the audiobook stuff, so I followed the story pretty far ahead, and I know where it's going.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was, but I will say it was really interesting. I actually sat down and watched the first episode, which is what we're going to be talking about today on the what do you call it? I sat down and watched it yesterday, and it was interesting going back all the way there after having gotten as far into the story as I have.
Yeah.
Because, like,
that way kind of see where things are getting set up. And
Well, it's that, but moreover, for me, like there's a lot of relationship stuff that happens, as the characters develop that I completely forgot about. Like, and by the way, it's only been 6 months since I discovered the show, so it's
so
not
you kind
even.
of tore through it pretty quick.
Oh, dude, once I started, there was no stopping me. I was like, oh my god, where's this going? Although I will say, everyone tells me how slow the first season is, and I don't know that I get that. I didn't think it was that slow personally.
Yeah,
Everyone's like, it's a slow build, and I'm like, I don't know. Maybe, but I am very predisposed to old school sci-fi. So
yeah. For me, I was watching it and kind of going into it. It's like, okay, it's a new science fiction show. They're going to have to do a lot of world building, a lot of exposition. So yeah, those first few episodes can be a slog to get through, and that's what I kind of know. And that's pretty much true of any kind of show you're going to watch. The first 3 or 4 episodes, I mean, you're going to be building up to whatever mid-season climax is going on. But yeah, for this one, it was I think about episode 5 when things started to come together. It was like, okay, no, I think we're done telling the backstory.
well,
Let's get into to story A and let's run with it.
I'm gonna be honest. I don't know if they're ever really done telling backstory, because they've done really good to season by season kind of bring out elements from the past, and
Okay.
that like they bring out like the characters, and I it's one of the interesting things. First off, I watched the first episode. The actual crew of the ship doesn't get much screen time in that first episode. It's mostly focused on the
Right.
main character, and I thought that was, I don't remember that, but it was very interesting to go back and see that. I think maybe each of the other crew members might get like a total of 5 minutes in the episode.
Yeah, Thomas Jane gets to distract you with his haircut in the first
I
episode.
got it. It's so he looks so fucking cool.
I was like, oh, I remember having that haircut in high school.
Like he's such a badass.
Yeah, there was a reason why he was the Punisher. Not the best Punisher, but he was the Punisher.
It was I think that movie gets shit on perhaps for, I don't know. I liked it. I don't. I never had a severe attachment to the character. Like, he was never one that I resonated with, and so
Yeah.
I kind of enjoyed that. Plus, I'm okay with any movie that has John Panette in like a featured role.
Yes, exactly. That movie was kind of bizarre because half the time it's like, okay, he's like trying to meld in some spaghetti western elements to this, but I can't get over the fact that the Punisher is in Tampa, Florida.
And there's a certain element of that's where I grew up, so that part kind of felt okay
Yeah.
about it too. I hate Florida,
like,
mind you, but
yeah, it's not everybody's cup of tea.
if I were to say the hardest part, isn't John Travolta the villain?
He's never played a convincing villain ever. It's like you're getting mad and your pitch on your voice is going up by several octaves.
Yeah, he's never convinced me. That's for goddamn sure. So that's probably, I think, the worst part of that fucking movie.
Yeah.
So back to the Expanse.
Yeah.
I'm curious. So how far into this did you actually make it so far?
Today I actually wrapped up season 1.
Oh, so good lord!
I got all the way through it.
What do you?
Taken about a week or so to get to at least episode 6, and then work got crazy and was doing crazy amounts of overtime.
Oh, you're good, man.
So I kind of catch it here and there. So like some episodes I'd start watching and then pick it up a couple days later. So that's never good.
So what are your thoughts and having ended season 1?
Yeah, it was definitely a slow build, at least for me. I think about episode 5 and 6 was kind of where everything started to come together as far as their story. And only 10 episodes. They get to it real quick after that, because then they find out what's actually going on. I'm trying not to deliver any spoilers myself. And then a lot of liberty themes start coming up in there. It's like, oh well, we got corporations kind of fooling everybody into thinking that there's some kind of attack going on and blaming one party versus another, and it was like very reminiscent of the USS Maine for the Spanish American War.
There's a lot of that, and that's like I watched. You'll get into it, like the basics. Like there's 3 main parties in the entire show. That part we can spoil because it's not. Essentially, you have they kind of actually tell you in the first episode, anyways. You've got Earth, you've got
Yep.
Mars, and then you've got the Belters. And
Yep.
essentially, like you have Earth is basically they sent people out into the universe and they tried to colonize Mars. Well, Mars, as any colony would do, goes and says, "Well, fuck this. We're kind of going to do our own thing, and we're going to be our own thing, and tough titties." And so
Yeah.
Mars creates its own government. So essentially, pulls it's very reminiscent of the whole English empire, where
Right.
essentially Mars would be the American colonies. Are like, well, yeah, you may have started us, but yeah, we're here and we're us. So deal with it. We're leaving.
Right.
Now, then you have essentially, as the people go out in the diaspora, they move out into the outer belt, and they're the people that actually do the mining. Now, these are people that, because of the distances, like they live out there, they procreate for generations, and they essentially become a different people.
Yeah, their
And
language is different. They even start to look different.
well, and you see in this first, especially in the first episode, like their connection to Earth is completely gone. You can see in the way that I can't remember what her name is, the leader of the UN essentially is torturing one of the Belters, and all she's got two hooks hanging on a wall, and just
Right.
has it and has arms draped over it,
Yeah.
and she just
They're
has
just
him
letting
hang.
gravity do the work. Yeah.
Yeah, she doesn't have to do shit because, like, essentially, without gravity, human beings grow taller, and everything stretches out on them. Their spines kind of change and whatnot,
Right.
and so all their lungs and their bloodstream doesn't work as well in the actual gravity anymore because it hasn't had to do it ever. And so it was interesting to see, like, oh, like they don't have to do much in this. Like, there's a serious home court advantage in this situation. Now, we gather all that from what is a torture scene by the head of the UN.
Yeah. Yeah. Played by Shori Agudashlu, who sounds like she has smoked a pack of cigarettes every day since the age of 9.
God, how hot is her voice, by the way?
Yes, exactly.
Oh my God, I wish all women could talk like that.
Yeah, I get turned on by the Kathleen Turner voice myself. So it's
No, well, it's funny is because like she's like I think she's playing a character significantly older than she is based on what I saw, as I've watched a couple of that or a couple like Comic-Con events I think that they've done, and she looked
yeah.
significantly younger in person. So I think she might just be playing older, or she's had a bunch of work done.
Well, she is Persian, and that's like the home of all of the good plastic surgery now is in Iran.
Really, I was unaware of that. I know
Yeah.
like I kind of always just assumed she was Indian, but I can't tell one from another, like, honestly. And it's terrible because I see so many Arab and Indian people in my day job.
Yeah, they. I guess in some respects, she is playing an Indian in this show. Like her last name is Abbasarala.
Okay,
I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Yeah, but she herself is Persian. I mean, she escaped from Iran in the early '80s.
that's
So,
actually really interesting. Um,
yeah.
well, it's kind of funny. Like, I don't know that they actually ever get into this in the actual show, so I'll say they're part of the way the actual story is on Earth in the series, and they never, I don't think, touch on this. And it explains. Have you ever in the first season? Did you get a sense that Alex has a bit of a Texas accent?
Yeah, a little bit. He's definitely got some kind of southern thing going on, and it's living in the South, it's definitely a little bit overplayed, but you can easily explain that like
It's 400 years in the future. Like, it would,
400 years
maybe.
in the future, people have probably evolved,
And
and
that's what's
linguistics will definitely change.
and there's also a part of the reason is because the way that the storyline actually goes is that like Indian people essentially take over Dallas, I think is what it is.
Yeah,
And so the whole Texas thing gets fused with Indian culture. And so you'll notice that like a lot of Indian people, as they're portrayed in the show, actually are like they're like this weird Indian Texas hodgepodge.
yeah,
Because
it is kind of interesting to see.
Well, it's because it's one of the things that I think that they play with really well in the show. And once again, why it's hard sci-fi is that like they get into like these little ideas, like so hundreds of years in the future, and humanity's made our way into the stars. How are the intermingling of people? How's that going to work? I mean, this would be a prime example of like say what are those assholes that the white replacement people that are afraid of being overtaken by minorities and that.
Oh, the
Uh,
alt right,
yeah,
the
but
race realist.
yeah. Well, what's interesting to me is that like in the particular, they actually paint it as not being the Mexicans that take over. They paint it as the Indians, or maybe it's like after maybe Indians or the Mexicans are taken over by the Indians after that. So it plays some interesting like themes along the political lines, and we also have the situations now where you have basically a truce between Earth and Mars, and then
Right.
essentially like the Belters just want freedom from both of them. They're like, we don't want any party or war. We just want to be free people.
Yeah.
But it also blends in that whole, well, you're here because of corporate interests. I don't know if that rings a bell for anybody else.
Yeah.
All those people that paid or got paid, the colonies came over and started businesses and, well, now we have business interests over here. So this is ours, not yours. Like, yeah, but we're here. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's like we're actually doing the work over here. You're just kind of like an absentee landlord.
well, and that's I guess my favorite part. If you go back to see episode 1, they set it up really early. I guess that's my favorite thing about this was that it set up a lot of very fair scenarios. I thought normally
Yeah.
when you get into politics like that, there's a clear perspective of like, oh, we're so great, and this is the way this all needs to be done, and blah 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 blah. And I thought that they played their hand very fair in the show.
Yeah. It was you can kind of see where logically this would kind of happen if you needed deep space mining operations. You would have some kind of colony built on, and in this case, it's a dwarf planet series, and you're gonna have to have one of those little outposts set up, and then eventually that's just gonna get people there because that's where the money is gonna be at. Everyone's gonna be looking for that hot space job, and
Hold on.
and hundreds of years later, then things are just kind of build up into its own little city.
So yeah, I mean it is. I think it's very realistic in that, and the politics never really push a one way or the other sort of system, and that's I really appreciated that. Like I think like they normally in one of these shows, if it were made with like what I would expect to happen is that they would kind of paint the UN as being Starfleet prior to where we're at now, and make it this
Right.
benevolent government, and all governments are the greatest things ever, that kind of deal.
No, they definitely showed the Earth being run by the UN is maybe not the nicest place ever.
Yeah.
At least as far as political intrigue and everything else goes.
Well, and that's exactly it definitely illustrates the way that control and power, the way that they, even with the best of intentions, corrupt. Like,
Yeah.
I don't get the impression that anyone in like government, like that, at least in their situation, it's not that the people are evil. Like they're gonna, you really get to see, oh well, if you're going for what your interests are, you're kind of gonna naturally end up in a certain. And I
Right.
really appreciated that.
Yeah, but they didn't really go too in depth on the first episode. They just kind of present it as is, and then
Yeah,
it's like yeah, here's the three parties. This is what's about to happen.
yeah.
Just kind of setting the stage for everything else.
Um, yeah, most of the first episode is just them on on a mining ship, and then essentially the plot is that they get a distress signal, and so they're sitting there, they're in a company, and they have the most like mundane company discussion ever as a worker. It's like, well, do we tell? They have the do we tell the boss about this or no?
Right.
We had a workplace accident essentially, and who do we tell about this? If we
Yeah.
ignore it, chances are it's gonna not hurt anybody, or people that are already hurt are just gonna continue to be hurt, kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know
This is
what
a
we
little bit of a wink and a nod. It was like, well, we're not going to file the report.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because it amounts to like they lose their bonus, shit like that, like, which is a very real kind of question. It's like, do we stop production and lose out on like the one little bit of a way that we get ahead or not?
Right.
And so they opt to go and they have to ignore it. But one person can't ignore it, and that happens to be Holt, our our esteemed hero, as it would be,
Yeah.
who literally moments before just got handed the supervisory job that he didn't want because the former guy went insane, and he's just been there long enough. They can't let him keep shirking their responsibility, essentially.
Yeah. It's like, well, you've been on all these other ships and you've demonstrated the fact that you have some kind of leadership capability, and this guy just went nuts and started shooting holes in the screens and everything else. I think in one of the last episodes I was watching, there was talking about him like petting his little porcelain dolls or whatever, and like talking to them as a sign that he was about to go nuts. So I was like, yeah, that's a big flag.
Well, yeah, and when they get down there, he's like got the dirt. Like he's just standing in dirt with a little plant in it, just kind of like talking to himself.
Right.
And that's another one of those like subtle things that I like. It's just, how would something as simple as just not being able to even see plant life, how does that affect you? I'm someone who spends a lot of time sitting in front of a computer screen, kind of just indoors. But the idea
Yeah.
of never seeing that stuff really just, it sounds awful. Like, it really does.
Yeah, like try to imagine like only working the night shift, but the times that you work are only right after sundown and right before sunup, and you never really get to see the sun. You can look outside, but it's all dark. There's
Yeah.
definitely such a thing as seasonal affective disorder. With the people who get like snowed in like days on end, you kind of go nuts a little bit.
Yeah, and let's amplify that times like you're hundreds of millions of miles from anything resembling a plant.
Right. You could take a walk outside, but it's vacuum and your blood will boil in within minutes. It's you just can't get away from it.
So essentially, Holt ends up at the end of the episode. He ends up being a whistleblower.
Yeah.
And everyone's pissed at him because, oh God, now we're all going to lose out on our bonus, and we may get ourselves into a worse situation going in, looking at this distress signal. But because he called it in, they have to deal with it. They
Right.
can't ignore it because now, international law would get involved in it, essentially.
Yeah. And that one thing that they brought up is like, yeah, it's probably pirates. They do this all the time. It's a little bit of a normalcy bias going on there.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this could just be, distressing us set up to draw us in and steal all our shit. Cause that's, when you're out in open water away from like a serious functional legal system, or police force, like, you're going to have people that take advantage of the ease of things inevitably.
And I also like the idea of space pirates.
Well, what is a space pirate exactly? I think the idea of it's funny because it's like all of a sudden we're back to the 1700s. We're living life kind of like like that just because. So they, they're all pissed off. He lets one person, Naomi Nagata, know that that he's the one who did it, and she's like, I'd keep that to yourself if I were you. Because she knows everyone's gonna everyone's gonna be pissed at him. She's clearly a little pissed at him. And you don't want to piss off somebody who's fine as Naomi Nagata, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
She's a sexy little lady. So but what ends up being is, so they go out there and they find this ship, and while they're out there, all of a sudden, was it an ambush? Somebody's after us. We've got incoming.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
in fairness,
near miss.
Well,
near miss that the ship that they were going to go help gets blown up.
It's not the ship that they were going to help. Actually, it's the ship that they were on, because they actually take a small, like a smaller they take a smaller vessel and leave their main vessel, so like you don't have to waste all the fuel going and doing that. Hey, we got one. We can get this close. And if something happens, like we can be essentially we can all die and save the main, save the ice, save the product. We don't want to lose the company money.
Right.
What ends up happening, however, is they end up getting bypassed, and like the actual ship, the company ship, gets blown up. And so at the end of the episode, they're kind of out there, they're alive, kind of because he made this shitty call.
Yeah.
But all of the people that were on their crew are now dead.
Yeah, it's a it's definitely kind of a thing, because when I was sitting there watching that part of the episode, I was like, okay, what just happened? Why did they blow up that ship? I need more answers, damn it.
Well, and that is one thing that the show in general does, is for every answer it gives you, it definitely continues to set up way more questions. Like, okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense. But why is that? Where'd that come from? What are we doing here?
Yeah, that's a little bit of a Pandora's box. I mean, okay, now you know what's inside the box, but there's tons of stuff in there that you have no idea what's about to happen next.
Well, and they start out with so many questions in this episode, because so they go and they find this ship that has nobody living on it, but they find a distress beacon. And one of the things they noted, the big question is, who shut off the reactor?
Yeah,
and
and shut
why?
it down properly. Yeah,
Yeah. and I think, like, you will eventually understand why that happens. Just, we don't find out yet. Basically it's we're setting up. We have a crew on this tiny ship, and they're in a weird situation. Like, something that pops off. It's I find it interesting that, like, it's written in such a way, like, you have this very, very stark moment, is that Holden he can't ignore people in trouble, is what they set up.
yeah,
Even if it means, he's gonna get lit up. He's the kind of guy who just has to kind of stick up for other people.
yeah. Probably because the way that the world is built, as they were setting it up, is everyone's kind of out for themselves on the belt and everything. So it's probably the reason why he likes going out and working on a crew, because then he can back up his friends and whatever. So it's just that type of personality. Was like, okay, well, this person said help, so I'm going to go help. Yeah, because
Well,
nobody
and
else is going to.
what's interesting, I think, with his character is honestly the fact that, so he's an earther,
Yeah,
and he basically is out here slumming it with the belters.
yeah,
And so there's a lot of situations in which later on he's very difficult for people to trust, because they hate earthers by default. Like, these are the people that have oppressed us forever. I'm not saying that's allegorical for anything. So even if he's a good one, he's still one of them,
yeah. Is going to be carrying a lot of baggage just from the association.
Yes. Now, since you were mentioning, like, everyone's kind of looking out for themselves, we cannot ignore one of the main characters in this first episode, and that's, as you said earlier, Thomas Jane,
Yeah,
who
Miller.
who plays Miller, the detective. And God, they set it, like, right in that first episode. They set it off what kind of world we're in, and he doesn't even seem odd or abnormal. Like, he even gives a couple nods to it, that they don't like police much in this world.
Yeah, yeah, they
He's
make no bones about it.
he's taking bribes, like, within the first 10 minutes of the episode. And then he's double crossing the people that have bribed him. Like, he's just doing so much that, he's not exactly. I don't know if you want to think of him as being a bad guy, but he's not certainly not the best guy. Now,
True.
I think you learn over time that there's more to him than that. It's just this world that he's in kind of makes him that.
Yeah, it gets alluded to in one of the later episodes, when one of the other characters starts talking about the game. And so it just seems like Thomas Jane's Miller character just is kind of playing it.
Yeah, like,
Yeah,
it's like, if someone else is going to take advantage of me, so I have to be the one to do it first. So at least I've got my piece. That if they're going to
right.
take from me, I'm going to have more when they take from me.
And it seems that way. Everyone living in close proximation to each other like that. It's Yeah, there's going to be a little bit of get aheadism a little bit.
I don't. Oh yeah, I can't remember where season one even ends, because Miller's story takes some weird turns. We'll just put it that way.
Yeah, it kind of goes in a roundabout way, but having just watched the season finale, I was like, oh, okay. But we'll talk about that another
time. For sure. All right. Well, I'm trying to think. Is there anything else specifically we wanted to get into this one? Like, part of the problem with the episode one is it's such an introductory episode, and they're trying to fill in so much space that you don't get
Right.
a whole lot of meat to kind of chew on. It does set up some interesting, like I said, some interesting world building. Establishes it at least does a very good job to establish kind of the political order and the types of people in there. We actually haven't seen much of the Martians in episode one, so
Yeah, they just get mentioned a lot. Yeah.
yeah. Which I think is also another interesting thing about the show is that it does a very good job of kind of illustrating that everybody has their own perspectives and like justifies their actions because of who they are and where they come from.
Yeah. It's
And
first couple episodes, like I said before, it's just going to be all exposition. So you're just going to have to get, buckle in and get ready, take notes like I did. It was like, okay, this is the OPA, and this stands for the Outer Planets Alliance. So now I know what that means when they keep referring to it over and over again. and the A, anytime you see it like spray painted somewhere, it's the Anarchy, which I kind of like.
well, they don't get much. I don't think they got much into it in the first season, but that actually that will take a front and center position moving forward.
Yeah.
I can tell you that much. So obviously, the ways in which they kind of portray that were very interesting to me, and like I said, a lot more fair than I think people would normally give credit for. Like I said, it's very difficult to tell what kind of political angle the showrunner is coming from in this. And to anyone who watches Doctor Who and has followed it through seasons 11 and 12, I gave up the first episode of season 11 because it was not being it was a little too transparent in what its message was. It wasn't even bothering with the story at that point. I said, "Nah, to hell with this." I was willing to give it a go. I didn't really care about a female doctor. It didn't bother me. Now,
They're just going to beat you over the head with it.
well, it wasn't even that. Like I could have dealt with that. Like Jodie's pretty attractive. I can stand to look at her for a while. I personally would have preferred Olivia Colman as the doctor. I think she would have done a much better job at it. But you get what you get. You go with the star power, and they just thought Jodie Whittaker had the star power. But man, it was literally the dialogue was so cringe inducing that first episode. Just if you could have written an intersectional politics handbook, just say fuck it and just hand them the dialogue, the transcript of the episode.
It's like they had the intersectional wheel of fortune behind them, and they were just like spinning it while they were writing it.
And just Xing it off and just moving to the next one, because
okay, we covered this small little sliver of society that only accounts for like 0.001%. We got them.
Yeah. Well, and from what I understand, it's only gotten worse. I think they said season 12 has been a little bit better in the writing, but not so not enough. Like it's the damage is done at this point, and they're gonna hemorrhage until they die.
Yeah, I just remember watching Doctor Who on like the public broadcasting in the 80s. And we just always thought it was like the weird British show with the guy with the crazy colored coat and everything. And we were just like,
Tom Baker,
this
right?
was kind of weird. Yeah. So we were all like, it's like, okay, well, this is just kind of a weird show. I don't understand why Dad likes it so much, but whatever.
I didn't understand. I'd never seen an episode, I think, until the 11th Doctor, Matt Smith.
Yeah.
I think his first episode in like 2011, maybe 2012.
Yeah, it seems like it was probably right around there. I want to say they almost brought it back in 2008.
That sounds about right. I didn't.
That one British actor who hates everything that he's in.
Eccleston.
Yeah.
I don't know much about him, but
oh my god, watching his interviews are insufferable.
Really, it's just a dish.
Yeah.
And so I actually missed him and I missed Tenet, and I came in with Smith. And I loved Smith. I just loved everything. I loved the character instantly. I loved what they're doing. I thought I liked the way Smith played the character. So whereas everybody has their favorite doctor and it's not Smith.
Yeah.
That's just who I came in at, and so that's always kind of who I judge doctors against. I really like Tenet, but
Yeah.
honestly, my favorite part of Tenet was fucking Jack Harkness.
Yeah, and they even had a side a split off show
Oh,
that was
Torchwood's
on
great.
Torchwood.
I didn't like it when they kind of started working with stars and made it like American.
Yeah, they
But
were trying to Americanize it a little bit too much.
yeah, it was. I watched it. It was okay, but it was not near like the first two seasons were very British and like they're fun. It was
Yeah.
very XFilesy, and they didn't. They towards later in the season, it got less. It got more serialized and less Monster of the Week. And
Yeah.
I think shows that do that always suffer. You know, X-Files was much better the more Monster of the Week it was, and when it started focusing too much on, like, the broader picture, it's like, ugh, gross.
Yeah, like with the X Files, he always had story A in the back. There's this vast government conspiracy to hide the aliens and hide the UFOs and everything. But
Mhm.
you always had that Monster of the Week story B line. But at the end of the episode, we would kind of show how it tied in, to story A. And then in the later season, it just kind of got a little bit out of hand. I think you're
Well,
right on that, especially after the first movie came out.
yeah, it's just everything is the backstory, and you're like, "Okay." Another great show that I think fell prey to that was Fringe. I
Yeah,
think I
the
liked
X Files replacement.
Yeah, I loved Fringe for 2 seasons when it was,
Yeah,
a
Fringe
lot of
was
mo
awesome.
and but then they get too much into the whole, espionage between the one world and the other world, and it's like, I don't care that much about this, just give me cool ideas to chew on. I guess that's the thing, is what because at a certain point when you do that, it becomes not a sci-fi show, it becomes a political intrigue show.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
you could
which
have
is
left like the observers being like this weird thing that people kind of notice when something strange happens. They're kind of like the Men in Black of the show.
Yeah, it's just, "Oh, great, so this is all that now."
Yeah,
Um, what's funny is that, like, with something like, The Expanse, which is an overtly like, politics is overtly front and center in the show,
yeah,
it still feels like and maybe it's because it's handling the politics at a higher level than those shows ever did, but it's very much, um it doesn't bother me when the show gets all waxes political and whatnot.
yeah. Probably because it's a little bit far removed from what we have right now. I don't think even in 400 years that the UN will even be a thing, much less run the entire planet.
God
So
God, we can
you know,
hope.
yeah. But it does get interesting to watch how it's playing out on this thing as one of many possible futures.
No, for sure. And I still love that no matter who's in charge, there's this idea that some people are going to want to be free. Like that, I guess
Yeah,
to me, that's my favorite thing about this series is that it doesn't matter who's in charge. There are those who want to be like, just no, I don't want any of that. I don't care how far I have to go. I don't want to be under anyone's thumb.
yeah. Even if I've got to go all the way to the outer planets, even on like a clear night, you couldn't even see me. You know,
Yeah,
it does kind of appeal to some of us a little more liberty inclined. It's because you're sitting there watching it, and it's like, man, these people had to spend what today would be a couple of years to get out there in the first place, much less build a society around it.
yeah.
It's kind of an undertaking.
No, it's something, and like I said, kind of preface things. They really play with the politics in interesting ways moving throughout the series. I know one of the other things is, like, so I think in season 1, they really go hard at corporations and how corporate interests are kind of evil,
Yeah,
but there's a certain degree to which I think they at least hint at. I don't think they're explicit in the way like you or I would probably be that it's not that the corporations are evil, it's that the corporations have power and the government is that power.
yeah,
They do get more explicit with that, I think, way later in the series. So,
Yeah,
it's an
that definitely
interesting
seemed
theme.
like that was the direction they were going in by the end of the first season. But yeah, we'll
Yeah,
have to dive into that one
we'll
on
we'll
future
we'll, we'll,
episodes.
we'll have to get there.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, is there anything else you wanted to add since we got it here?
No, I guess I can give like the particulars of the episode. The title of it was Dulcinea, directed by Terry McDonough. It came out December 14th, 2015, and for a premiere episode on Sci-Fi, it actually had over 1 million viewers. So I thought that was kind of interesting because normally they don't get shows that big. I think a lot of people are looking forward to it.
Well, and what? So to also let people know, so the show was actually canceled on Sci-Fi.
Yeah.
And thanks to some people on Twitter and on the YouTube, they actually managed to get the show picked up by Amazon.
Right.
I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Jeff Bezos himself is actually a big sci-fi geek.
Yeah, he's a big space nerd too. So.
Yeah, so I think a lot of it has to do with like, oh wait, there's a great sci-fi show out there. He may have picked it up just because he's the richest man in the world and it's a good sci-fi show.
And I want to put money into it, you know.
Well, I mean, and it's in a way, it's like, so you have this what is essentially, it's a great show, but I mean, it's on a dying platform. You know, they made it on a system where everybody is moving away from. So even in the best of situation, like, had this come out probably 10 or 15 years beforehand, like it might have had a shot to do some serious numbers because people still watch TV, but nobody watches TV anymore. So
at that point, we all been going, Firefly, what?
I don't know. No, I don't know about all that, but
yeah.
God, Firefly's so good. And my favorite meme to give out is the might have been the losing side. Not sure it was the wrong one.
Yeah, exactly.
I will comment
Brown
that on
Coat Creed.
Yeah, I will not. I'll throw that on everything forever.
Yeah, I aim to misbehave. It was another one of my favorite now quotes.
I know the worst part is like, even if they chose to bring that show back for whatever reason now,
yeah,
I wouldn't.
It would be. It's just SJW'd up the wazoo.
I wouldn't even want it, especially like with Joss. Like,
yeah,
like I still don't know how they've managed to keep Rick and Morty as pure as they have, given fucking Matt or Dan Harmon's particular interests.
Dan Harmon is kind of an odd duck in that whole thing because his character Rick, probably a little bit closer to what libertarians would think is a libertarian, and then when he had his podcast Harmontown, he would just get off on the whole lefty progressive stuff to the nth degree, and you're like, are you even paying attention to what you're writing?
Well, yeah, they have him right. Well, but then again, he doesn't. Rick isn't written as being a good person either.
No, he's kind of a scumbag.
Yeah, they have him written to be a scumbag, and maybe that's kind of the way in which he handles it.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Ron Swanson character on Parks and Rec. In the first season, he's upset that he got shot in the back of the head with a shotgun because the guy didn't have a hunting license, and I'm like, a libertarian would say, all right, well, great that you don't have a hunting license, still you shot me in the back of the
head. Yeah. Well, I mean, I could go on forever about the Ron Swansons and how they while I'm excited to have a libertarian character in the show, they really don't understand what a libertarian is. Like the fact that they have him kind of like he's really into generals is one of the things they make out. Like he's really into military generals. And you're like, I don't know that any real libertarian would be really into that. I mean,
if the internet has taught us one thing, there's no real libertarians
ever. There is that. So I guess we have that. Maybe that's his one deviation, is that he likes war for the sake of cool guys to worship.
Yeah, sure. He's got that poster of Georgia's Patton. Why not?
Yeah. That part always just struck me as weird. I'm like, this is what people think we are. We're just like people that love companies and the military or something. Like, it's really not it.
Yeah, I think the episode where the one former Parks and Rec director was smoking a doob and he threw up his hands and he got mad. I was like, no, No, we'd have
Yeah.
been like, oh wow, but you were doing that on the job. That's kind of weird.
I mean, if you got away with it, you got away with
Yeah, sure. Not like anybody noticed.
it.
Park still opened on time, I guess.
So, all right. Well, we have diverted quite
Oh yeah,
away from what we're talking about. So that was our take on season 1 of episode 1 of The Expanse, folks.
yeah.
We'll
Can't wait to
be
do about episode 2.
we'll be we will be putting these out, I believe, weekly. Would be the idea theoretically.
Yeah.
And I think what do we say we're going to be alternating them between your feed and my feed? Or
Yeah,
do you
we can
want,
do that if you want.
or do you want to put them behind a paywall? I think more people will hear them if we put them out in the feeds for sure.
You know what? I will just release this as a episode for next week.
All right, bud. Well, I think that's about it for today.
Yeah, I think we chased down a whole bunch of rabbit holes not related to the Expanse. So our episode on the Expanse was expansive.